Californians should prepare to pay more.
They're just pushing the price up, pushing it up, pushing it up.
We built models, and it really doesn't matter whether it's $8 or $7 or $7.50.
Over $4,000. That's how much you could be paying in addition to all of your other car expenses in California.
But the key to concentrate on is those regulatory cost components. They're going up. That's something that the state can do something about today.
So what we think we ought to do is try to negotiate a better deal for Utahns.
The models all indicate the price of gas is going up.
Make sure that we're getting a fair deal at the pump.
AB 1421. We're going to talk all about the mileage tax, how they want to tax you.
And thinking about shifting that burden away from the Utah taxpayer and to have it be more fairly shared amongst industry.
For every single mile that you drive.
So we've got a series of seemingly kind of related topics. We've got a Valero shutdown. The Valero shutdown just happened. We've got confirmed reports that thermal imaging indicate boop, 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 we're shutting her down. And we knew this was coming. We thought it would come probably in April, but with the October contracts being what they were, I think it was pretty clear that sometime in January, and it's my understanding January 31st, a few days ago, is when the final close down of the Valero Benicia refinery happened. Now, we know that the Phillips 66, that has already taken place back in October. So we're down to just a handful of refineries in California. Meanwhile, so you got that story. You've also got a story of California imports possibly being impacted. And that's because we've got kind of these tariffs, trade wars going on where India, who sends a lot of finished gasoline to California, is no longer going to be taking oil from Russia. So, you've got all of these little bits and pieces that aren't little bits and pieces. They're big chunks. And the way that California has positioned itself, it no longer has the ability, and it should have the ability to domestically produce its own oil gas products. It's basically given those away because they want to virtue signal that they're all green. And the reality is that we're going in the wrong direction here. And unfortunately, Californians, if the projected numbers on gas prices are correct by the end of this year, Californians are going to be the ones that are going to, be wildly impacted by this, and other related states. And California is such a big economy that it has so much impact, not on the West Coast, but on the country in general. So much stuff is made in California. And then on top of that, you've got a mileage tax that's been years and years and years and years in development, because when you can no longer tax gasoline cars because California, after 2035, they don't really want to have any gas cars. Yeah, that's not going to work out. Then there's no tax money coming in to pay for the road repairs. So let's just go ahead and put on a speedometer reader on everybody's car, and we'll just track their mileage so that we can tax everybody and, make the roads drivable. It's wild. So many little bits and pieces that are impacting basic affordability issues in California and adjoining states and the West Coast. Let's get into it. Here we go. As reliance on imported gasoline rises, California adapts to a new world. Is this a new world order? I mean, it seems like it is. So much of this is unnecessarily self-induced. You know what I mean? You had over 40 refineries, I think, as of 1991. And now you are down to, I believe, 7. 7. That is how hard California has pushed out oil and gas from their economy. We're clean. We're virtue signaling. We're much better than you. We're going to go with this all electric economy. And meanwhile, oil companies, you can suck it. And as a result, the oil companies have said, okay, yeah, we've got options of being in other states. Chevron decided we're going to take our, headquarters and we're moving to Houston, boys. And that's what they did, because big companies have options and they have to they have to kick profits up to shareholders. And if their refinery in California isn't doing it, like Valero in Benicia, this is what happens. Closed. So I'm going to skip down. Phillips wrapped up crude processing at its LA refinery. That's the Phillips 66 LA refinery in mid-October, and said it remains on schedule to shut the facility by year's end. Valero officials, that's the one that we're concerned about with today, last week said that the company will shutter the Benicia plant as planned, despite efforts by California officials to persuade company officials to keep it open or find another company willing to operate it. They literally, the Governor commissioned the California Energy Commission. Hey, can you guys work out a buyer for this? There's no buyers. Because who wants, even though it's probably one of the most efficient refineries and most advanced refineries in California, who wants to buy a refinery in California when legislators and leadership has just continually crapped on the industry with fines, overregulation, just onerous, you name it. Making it such that, and saying, hey, we're not supporting you. We're not supporting you any way, shape, or form. Here's an $80 million fine. That kind of thing is literally pushed out, and specifically pushed out this refinery that we're working on today. And here's the other adjunct. In the same article, India over the last 2 years has been the largest supplier to California over the last 2 years, sending roughly 6.56 million barrels of finished gasoline. Not talking crude, we're talking finished. So California has its own special blend of herbs and seasons that it needs for its gas, because they have virtue signaled, we have the cleanest gas in all of the land. Well, they do, but the problem is that then you reduce the number of people that can produce it for you. And what India has been doing has been taking Russia's oil and refining it. Unfortunately, Russia's oil has been chased around by the United States because they're not supposed to be doing that, because there's basically a restriction on them, this ghost fleet of tankers taking out Venezuela's oil, and Russia's one of the big culprits. So we've got 6.56 billion barrels of finished gasoline, followed by about 3.77 million barrels from Canada and 3.47 million barrels from South Korea. But India is the big one. So far this year, India has sent 2.94 million barrels of alkylates to California. Indian refiners await government advice on Russian oil import halt. India is no longer going to be taking Russian imported oil. And that's a deal that Trump has allegedly cut. Whether or not that will stick, that's what's kind of being bandied around. And with California, they are forced, with this most recent closure, California is forced to import, meaning you've got all these big oil tankers coming in and bringing it in from thousands of miles away, even though California has got the fourth or the fifth largest oil reserves in the United States. But they've basically virtue signaled and with policy created a situation where they don't have the ability to basically protect their own domestic supply that they need. They're dependent upon foreign countries, and they're dependent upon other states. And now we're going even further. Here's the storyline. U.S. seizes Venezuela-linked Russian-flagged oil tanker after weeks-long pursuit. Now, this whole thing has been just out there, and hey, what's going on here? Well, bottom line is that India is no longer going to be taking oil from Russia. And so a source of import to California, that's going to get more expensive. Just period, it is. It's just that is happening. Then you've got Utah GOP lawmakers propose plan to cut gas prices by ending refinery tax break. What's going to happen here is, let's just take a quick read of this, because this is interesting. Utah Republican lawmakers are rolling out a proposal they say could lower what drivers pay at the pump by as much as 20 cents a gallon. That's Utah constituents, right? All right, which means if money isn't coming in to Utah, if Utah is reducing that tax to its residents, it's got to be increased somewhere else, doesn't it? And Utah isn't a major exporter of gasoline to California, but Nevada, Arizona, Utah, they're kind of all in play. So you've got all these situations happening basically at the same time. Here's another thing. We're in our winter blend season right now. And when winter blend goes to summer blend, there's always a price hike. So you've got that. And then as spring morphs into summer, you've got greater driving demand because people want to get in their cars when it's sunny and warm. And hey, the kids are out of school. Let's go to Yosemite, wherever. Let's go to the Grand Canyon. This is going to be greatest, family vacation ever, said Chevy Chase, right? I mean, and so all of these things are set to align in spring and summer. Now, will they happen? I've also seen other reports where they're like, 2026 could be the cheapest gas prices in years and years and years. I've seen reports like that from reputable reporters who are citing other things. So what I go on is demand and supply. Demand isn't dropping. Demand is not dropping, but supply is. And when you restrict supply of anything, does the price go down? Hell no. Hell no. The plan would remove a long-standing tax exemption for oil refineries, shifting part of the tax burden away from drivers and onto fuel producers, making it more expensive outside of Utah, say in California. Utah House Speaker Mike Schultz told KUTV anchor Heidi Hatch, that's a name, on the Take Two podcast, the state leaders are frustrated by Utah's persistently high gas prices. Hey, come to Washington State. You guys got nothing to bitch about. At least you have gas. You know what I mean? You have gas. Here in Washington State, we've kind of got gas. We got a bunch of refineries and we've got the Olympic pipeline, but we have got politicians here that are just so mentally challenged. Oh, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. Yeah, the carbon tax and, tax and trade and a bunch of nonsense. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, Washingtonians are paying a little bit more than a few cents a gallon per tax. We have probably the third highest gasoline prices in the United States consistently. And there are often times where California is lower than us, is lower than Washington State. And it's because it's so expensive for our refineries to do the emissions thing because we virtue signal green so hard here. It's sickening. Schultz explained that while Utah produces more gas than it consumes, a significant portion is exported to nearby states such as Arizona, Nevada, Wyoming, and Idaho, areas that once relied on California's refineries. Weird. So what we're saying is Arizona, Nevada, Wyoming, and Idaho can no longer depend on California's refineries. That's exactly what we're saying. Roughly 34% of it goes to other states. Utah is just kicking out that finished gas product, kicking it out, right? But now they're saying, wait a minute, we've got expensive gasoline here. We want to drop that a little bit. Other states are going to have to pick up that cost. Problem is these refineries here on the Wasatch Front, I pronounced that right, are seeing sky-high record-setting profits because of that. Well, there you go. If you're going to restrict the profits majorly on a refinery, eventually they go away. So Utah, be careful. Proposal would remove the sales tax exemption Utah refineries have long enjoyed. Refineries were originally granted that exemption decades ago, but it's time to revisit the policy. That's what it's going to do. We think we can lower it to somewhere between 10 and 20 cents. That doesn't get us in line with the national average, but it gets us a lot closer. All right. Okay. Yeah. But none of this is particularly great news for Californians. Californians like this next segment here. I mean, California mileage tax, pilot programs, and permanent policy inertia. What this article basically says is that this pilot program to track people's mileage and then tax them based on that has been in the pipeline for so long that they're just going to let it sit there and sit there and sit there. And then by the time that it becomes required, it's going to be one of those things that just pops up and boom, all of a sudden, here you go. I would expect that in Washington State. In fact, I think this article talks about Washington State being one of the markets where this is a real deal. Yeah, Oregon, Utah, and even Washington have tested or implemented versions of mileage-based user fees. What hasn't been tested or improved upon is public awareness. And this is going to be one of those bombs that just goes off. Oh, hey, by the way, we're implementing this. You guys are going to need to start paying per mile because we encouraged you to drive electric cars, and now we can no longer tax gasoline adequately enough to support the infrastructure of the roads we drive on. It's all interconnected. So bottom line is if you are in a big Democrat-run state, Oregon, Utah, Washington, California, you're going to get taxed a lot more, no matter what. No matter what, that is a coming. It's not going the other way. Even what Utah is doing is self-serving for its constituents, which I don't blame. It's their system to either raise the taxes or lower the taxes, and they're doing, allegedly, what they can to make it more affordable for Utahns. How do you spell that? I saw spelling of Utahns. That's Utah in plural. Utah people in plural. Never seen that before. But I don't do a lot of Utah stories because it usually kind of falls under the radar. Except for, some crazy stuff, right? The whole polygamy thing. Yeah, got that out there. But anyway. So what you've got is a situation where all of these things are coming all at once. And are they going to result in $8 or even more gasoline in California? Well, some of the things that would offset that are what we've experienced this past kind of year with the lowering of gas prices. Some of that has to do with international supply. Some of that has to do, there's a number of different factors there that have gone into it. But none of those factors have the ability, in my opinion, as a real estate guy talking about oil, to offset what California has done to its own domestic production of oil products, gasoline products. It's basically shrunk them to no end. We're seeing the tail end. I'm literally podcasting, hey, Valero Benicia has gone dark. The thermal print is indicating it's cold. The body it's going into rigor mortis. And we knew that was happening. And California said, well, Gavin Newsom, he released his comments, which were basically, we're working with the industry. We're seeing what we can do. We're going to provide you enough imports to make sure that gas prices don't spike here. And his statement was just like, you know what I mean? You're like, what? Yeah, but you've caused all this. And now you're saying you're working with the industry? Yeah. It's absolute gibberish. It's absolute nonsense is what that is. Because the refinery just closed down. They didn't sell. They didn't idle it temporarily. They closed her down. And as a result, you've restricted the supply by 17, 20, 22%, however you want to measure it. In pure terms of gasoline, I believe it's closer to that 22. And when you reduce your supply, you're going to have to bring it from somewhere else, leaving you open to import, stuff that can impact, you got to be any kind of problem, any kind of problem outside of what you can control, which is what happens when you rely heavily upon the import. So when will when will the actual impact happen? I think you start to see oil prices or gas prices at the pump, and that's what we all measure it by, right? Because none of us are filling up our, jet fighter pilot to go flying. And so I think this summer you see a big spike in gas prices. I think that happens. I think that happens one way or the other, and particularly to California. Washington State, we're always hosed. We're always hosed because we're upper left USA. And, politicians here are able to get away with absolute murder because there's nobody else. I mean, our next door neighbor is Oregon. Ugh, crazy. Then you got to work your way on down to California. So West Coast, best coast. Yeah, best coast is for highest gasoline prices. Guaranteed. And this summer, let's see what happens. Make sure you're subscribed, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks again for being here. Bye for now.